Wow. I got to get to Russia before we close. Where do we stand currently on the battlefield in Russia? It seems that if I'm reading Western media, Russia is either killing or pushing out any Ukrainian that just so happened to be in Kursk.
Yeah.
And where do we stand on the battlefield in and of itself in regards to the Donbas proper?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, on the non-battlefield side, right, all the headlines and the focus is on the idea that Trump is going to be pushing us for a ceasefire, and the response already that Russia's, no, we're not interested, right? And already the Financial Times is running articles trying to push Trump. Oh, you've got to show us. Putin says no. Putin is allied with the mullahs in Iran and the Chinese Communist Party, and he said no to you. You have to show strength. You have to escalate to de-escalate, right? Things that I said back on the day after the election, right? That would be, where things would inevitably end up. On top of this, this big economic shift, primarily for Europe, with the oil cutoff and the repercussions that will cause, in Slovakia and Hungary and others, lashing out back against Kiev, and long-range strikes that are taking place back and forth. There have been very large attempted Kiev regime drone attacks over the holidays over the last few. You haven't heard much about them because they haven't been very successful. A few hits, out of hundreds launched, that sort of thing, which is already par for the course, and larger Russian missile and drone attacks in response. That's all something that is continuing on essentially a daily basis. But on the battlefield, Russia has now taken Kharkov. I don't think there's any real question about this. This is the second to last of these supply lines in southern Donbas. I don't believe the Russian Ministry of Defense has officially announced it yet, but everyone already knows that the Kharkov has finally been taken. And that sets up what is going on. Russia is moving to not take Pokrovsk on directly, but to lay siege to it and cut off its supply lines, to flank it. And then, to slowly start to cut it in multiple directions. And they're having, I would say, some pretty rapid success, considering the scope of the territory. And what all this means, two big things. One, with Kharkov fallen, even the possibility that the Kiev regime could reach Donetsk city with artillery other than the HIMARS is now gone. Right? They shelled Donetsk city since 2014. Right? Well, that is now finally over, except with HIMARS. Right? That's the one thing that they could still reach it with. In which case, you might as well say it's the U.S. bombing Donetsk city, because we know that they approve and provide the targeting for every single HIMARS strike, because the New York Times told us so. Whether with a normal HIMARS rockets or the ATACMS, it's still the same. So that's an important, right? Donetsk had a new year free of artillery shelling, which is something for the people there in the Donbas to celebrate. Other than that, of course, Russia, now that they've taken Kharkov, and more especially once Pokrovsk is dealt with in the coming months, there's nothing really all the way to the Dnieper. It's pretty much open steppe. There's nothing geographical, topography, no big urban centers until you reach the bank of the Dnieper River. There you have Dnipropetrovsk and Mirnograd, but they, all that distance in between, there's nothing there. So Russia is at this point a few kilometers away from entering the Dnipropetrovsk region in what will be essentially undefended steppe. So if Russia wants to move west, they will be able to. In the north, Russia is making the slow progress still in Chasiv Yar and Toretsk. two battles that have continued on forever, showing that the Kiev regime can still hold on toughly, right? Losing just a few hundred meters, a street a day, that sort of thing. Those fights, Russia is still grinding on and making progress, but it has been a rather lengthy affair. Same thing, even more so in Seversk. But by the spring, Russia will have finished up or be finishing up Pokrovsk and moving on this last major defensive line in the Donbas, which is the Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinovka line, which means on the battlefield by the end of 2025 at the latest, Donbas should be fully liberated.
Wow.
Right. Which you might say, wow, but if you had said back in 2022 that Russia won't fully take the Donbas until 2025, there's a lot of people who, would have scoffed that the Russian advance would be that slow.
It's hard fighting.
Hard fighting. And again, that's because NATO has entirely been bent.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
In the north, Russia is probably within 2 or 3 months away of closing up the Kursk incursion point. They continue to take ground, and the Suja pocket, because now it's less of an incursion zone and more a pocket that is slowly being strangled in Suja. That is something that is going to be pushed. But there is the potential for both sides to launch different offensives in the remaining months of the winter. Look for that to happen, because the Kiev regime has received large numbers of military vehicles and now armaments to go with them. Artillery shells, U.S. Strikers in the hundreds, Australian older Abrams tanks, lots of things that we haven't seen on the battlefield yet, which means they're being prepped for an offensive. So whether that is towards Bryansk or the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant or Moldova or Belgorod or somewhere, they're not done yet. They're going to make another suicide Hail Mary pass offensive that they've got in their heads that before negotiations begin, they want to create some new facts on the ground, blah, blah, blah. Never ignoring the fact that Russia is basically saying, look, we'll talk, but we're not interested in any ceasefire except for on our terms. We're not interested in any compromise. And no one in the U.S. or Kiev is paying any attention to what Russia is saying, which is fair enough, because Russia is not only keeping an ear on what they're saying, and they're focused on achieving results on the battlefield, which is where they believe that this conflict will ultimately be decided, which is almost certainly true, however long that end game is into the future.
Mark, man, I always appreciate you. Thank you for staying a bit longer. There was a lot to get to. I feel like I haven't talked to you in a while, especially over the new year, but there's a lot to get to, and the world has become far more complicated, man. And so I really appreciate you giving me your time. And look, in general,
the world has always been complicated. We're just starting to realize how complicated
it seems to be getting more complicated.
But my favorite quote, if I may be so indulged: the old world is dying, the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters.
The one and only Mark Sleboda, international relations security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. You can find him on YouTube at youtube.com. At Real Politic with Mark Sleboda on YouTube, and on Facebook.com/Gramsci. Mark, man, always appreciate you, man. Thank you for your contribution. I really do appreciate it. Thanks
for having. Catch you again soon, Jamal.
Have a good one. All right, the man himself, Mark Sleboda. I feel like the world is getting more complicated. And yeah, I appreciate Mark, his guidance, his explanation of how this world is put together. We have a few people on that give their takes, but Mark has been one of those people that I think have been more right than pretty much anybody else that I've spoken to on these issues of foreign policy.